Okay, let's get into this. There's this real buzz right now, isn't there? Feels like the world is, well, calling out. Maybe you're eyeing that incredible job overseas, or, thinking about that top tier university abroad, or maybe pursuing something like a golden visa. Whatever it is for you, it feels like global opportunities are really knocking. But then just as you get excited, you often hit this snag. Paperwork. And not just any paperwork. It's about verifying really key documents, things like your FBI background report or maybe certain U.S. immigration records. Getting them recognized, accepted, officially in another country can feel like a pretty big wall to climb.
And that's precisely where this idea of an apostille comes in. It's essential if your target country is part of the Hague Apostille Convention. For these federal documents, we're talking about FBI reports, USCIS documents, it's not just about getting any stamp. It's a specific authentication process handled by the U.S. Department of State. That's what gives these papers their legal standing internationally. And what's really interesting, and frankly where a lot of the stress comes from for people, is how sensitive and complex this is, especially for these documents. Think about an FBI report. That's deeply personal stuff, immigration records. Same deal. Very sensitive, very foundational. Getting that Department of State apostille or authentication has to be spot on. The requirements are incredibly detailed, and getting it wrong,
yeah,
that can completely derail your plans.
Yeah.
That job, that uniplace, that visa, gone. So it demands accuracy, yes, but also speed and just absolute reliability.
Exactly. It's so much more than just ticking a box or getting a stamp. It's fundamental to making sure your whole journey actually happens smoothly. So we've done a real deep dive into sources that look at this very specific hurdle, getting those FBI checks and immigration docs apostilled quickly, correctly. Let's unpack what we found.
Okay, so these key documents, the FBI report, specific immigration records, they're like critical puzzle pieces, right? Especially when you're aiming for something big. A golden visa, that international job offer, studying overseas. The sources we looked at really hammered home how vital and, how sensitive getting these specific federal documents authenticated by the right place, the U.S. Department of State, really is.
Right. And what makes it tricky, according to the sources, isn't just the usual bureaucracy, it's the nitty-gritty details. For instance, that FBI background check. It needs a very specific kind of signature or seal to even be considered for Department of State authentication. You can't just send in any old copy you have lying around. If it's digital, you might need to jump through hoops to get a properly certified hard copy first. Okay. And what about the immigration documents? Did the sources get into the weeds on those? What makes authenticating them so complicated?
They did, yeah. Sources mentioned that documents coming from agencies like USCIS also need that Department of State authentication for international use. The challenge there often lies in verifying, where the document actually came from and making absolutely sure it meets the exact formatting or endorsement rules the Department of State is looking for. And it's not even standardized across all immigration document types. So that adds another layer of, potential confusion.
Wow. It sounds like messing up even one tiny detail right at the start could just bring everything grinding to a halt later on, especially if you've got deadlines breathing down your neck for visas or job start dates.
Oh, absolutely. The sources really highlight those common pitfalls, people sending in the wrong type of document altogether, or maybe missing a required signature. Incorrect formatting is a big one too, or even just simple errors filling out the Department of State's own submission forms. Any little thing like that can lead to rejection, and rejection means delays, significant delays, which, for someone anxiously waiting on that visa or job offer, it can be kind of disastrous. Plus, the official government process itself, it just takes time. That adds to the pressure cooker.
Okay, so let's recap. You've got the highly sensitive personal information involved. You've got specific eligibility requirements for each different type of document. You have these super detailed formatting needs from the Department of State, plus the built-in processing time at the federal level. It really paints a picture of a process that's, frankly, quite difficult to navigate on your own unless you really know what you're doing.
It really does. And the sources point out that because of all these complexities and because the stakes are so high, this paperwork is often the absolute bedrock of your application to live, work, or study somewhere else. A lot of people start looking for, reliable help, ways to make sure it gets done right the very first time, which naturally leads to the question, how do you tackle something this detailed, this critical, efficiently?
And that's exactly where our sources started pointing towards the real value of getting experienced assistance. They specifically brought up one service operating in this space, focusing precisely on these federal documents we've been talking about, apostillefbyreport.com.
Yeah, what's interesting there is how the sources describe them, not just as like a general apostille place, but one that specializes in FDI reports and immigration documents. They really emphasize that this specialization means they inherently understand the very specific requirements and potential roadblocks we've just been discussing.
Right. They seem to zero in on the unique challenges of getting these particular sensitive federal documents authenticated properly. The sources we looked at noted they position themselves as a premier provider. Their whole pitch seems to be built around expertise you can trust, plus speed, plus reliability.
Okay, but that raises a key question, doesn't it? How do they actually deliver on that speed and reliability promise? Given that the government process itself has its own timeline, the sources mention they offer Department of State authentication services, and they talk about providing a kind of fast-track service.
Right, but what does fast track really mean here, based on the sources? It's not like they have a magic wand to speed up the State Department itself, right? It seems the sources imply their speed comes from their expertise in managing the whole process end to end, knowing exactly what's needed up front, making sure the documents are prepared absolutely correctly the first time, avoiding those common errors, and having really efficient internal systems for submitting everything and tracking it with the Department of State in Washington, D.C. Essentially, they handle that whole interaction for you.
Exactly. It's all about minimizing the errors and delays that are within their control, making sure your application gets to the Department of State perfectly prepared and then tracked efficiently through the system. The sources also made a point of their accessibility. They serve clients across all 50 states.
And convenience seems key too. They offer secure online application options, which is great, but also the ability to actually visit their agency in person if you prefer. And here's where it gets really practical for anyone listening who needs this specific help. The sources give the actual details. They state you can reach apostillefbireport.com by phone at 978-424-4629, or you can visit them in person at their office, 1215 Main Street Unit 115, Tewksbury, MA 01876.
And quite notably, the sources mention their pricing. They advertise their Department of State authentication services for under $200. They talk about handling this very sensitive process like the pros, which is reassuring. They offer a satisfaction guarantee too. The whole message seems to be about aiming for accurate processing and ultimately giving you peace of mind.
So what's the bottom line here? If your big global plans that visa, job, or study opportunity hinge on getting an apostilled FBI background report or a crucial immigration document, well, navigating that complex maze of Department of State authentication doesn't necessarily have to be this overwhelming, error-filled nightmare. Understanding the specific challenges, which, our sources really laid out clearly, it highlights why having specialized expertise in this very niche area can be so incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. We live in a world that increasingly demands official, verified proof of who we are, our histories, our statuses, especially when we want to cross borders. So think about this. How does finding a trusted, specialized resource for something as specific as authenticating your federal documents, how does that shift from being just another annoying bureaucratic step into becoming perhaps a fundamental key, the very thing that unlocks your entire personal and professional future on the global stage?